Hello, everyone. My name is Olivia. I'm 47 years old, and this is one of the most unbelievable stories I've ever experienced. Even now, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it, but I can't stop replaying the events in my mind.
On the evening before my first day at work, where I needed to pack my own lunch, I prepared a sandwich. After assembling it, I went into the living room, turned on the TV, and immediately ate it. Tried making coffee with cat food instead of coffee grounds. Would not recommend at all. Grabbed a jug of milk from the fridge, picked up a dinner plate from the cupboard, and started pouring the milk onto the plate. My mom walked by, stared, and asked what on earth I was doing. A sixth earthquake hit at around 3 a.m. while I was asleep. The shaking lasted 20 seconds, and I woke up 16 seconds in, standing in the hallway, clutching a vase. What was happening? After an exhausting day of over 12 hours of computer drafting, staring at tiny 0.5mm lines, I got so confused that I turned to the person beside me to ask what I did wrong. I explained my issue and got halfway through before realizing I was asking my reflection. To top it off, I calmly answered myself. That was the moment I decided to head home. As a teenager working the overnight shift at a 24-hour McDonald's during summer, my sleep schedule was completely off. One evening, my parents woke me for dinner. I shuffled to the table, half asleep, and when my dad asked me to say grace, I bowed my head and muttered, "Thank you for choosing McDonald's. May I take your order?" Tried tapping a photo in a newspaper to open the full article. Took several seconds to process why that didn't work. Turned my car around to go back home because I forgot my keys. I was driving. Walked into the work bathroom to relieve myself. Instead of unzipping my pants, I unbuttoned my dress shirt, removed it, and then took off my undershirt. It hit me that I was standing shirtless at the urinal. What was I doing? Woke up suddenly, convinced there had been an earthquake. I called out to my wife, who was in the living room, asking if everything was fine. She asked why, and I told her about the earthquake. She calmly explained that I had just farted in my sleep and woke myself up. I went straight back to bed. These days, when I can't find my phone, the first thing I do is check if it's already in my hand. Hungover, I opened my back door and tried to turn off the light. After feeling around for the switch, I realized it wasn't a lamp. It was daylight. The other night, I stepped into the backyard to bring my dog inside. Automatically, I started calling the dog as I walked toward it. Then my brain caught up. I remembered the dog was already asleep, and I was actually approaching a black bear snacking on watermelon rinds from the trash. Took the metro home only to realize later that I had driven to work. That was a long night. I used to work the drive-thru at McDonald's 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. The constant repetition had conditioned me to say, "Welcome to McDonald's. How can I help you today?" Whenever I heard the headset beep. One day, I became intensely focused on swatting an especially elusive fly. Without realizing it, I started saying, "Welcome to McDonald's. How can I kill you today?" to every car that came through. It wasn't until a coworker stopped laughing long enough to tell me that I understood what I'd been doing. Not one customer reacted. They just wanted their nuggets. After an 8-hour cashiering shift at Target, filled with endless polite chatter, I stopped by a dollar store. The cashier greeted me with, "Hi, how are you?" I replied, "Good, how are you?" They answered, "Good, thanks." And I said, "That's good. Did you find everything okay today?" Everyone in line and the cashier stared at me like I'd lost it. Edit. Glad to know I'm not the only one who's had cashier autopilot moments. Thanks for the gold. Less than 3. My sister had a momentary lapse and left the kitchen faucet running. When I went to turn it off, I flipped the light switch instead. I kept flipping it, getting frustrated when it didn't stop the water. I even grabbed my toolbox to take off the faceplate, determined to figure out why the switch wasn't working. My other sister, who watched the whole thing, finally stepped in, told me I'd lost my mind, and turned off the faucet herself. I accidentally dropped my pants while going through TSA. It was an early morning flight, and I skipped coffee to sleep on the plane. At security, I emptied my pockets, took off my shoes, placed them on my luggage, and removed my belt. Without thinking, I also pulled down my pants. Realizing my mistake, I hurriedly pulled them back up, standing there mortified. Thankfully, there weren't many people at the airport at 4:30 a.m. Holding a cup of coffee in one hand and my phone in the other, I walked to my room. I took a sip of my phone and tossed the coffee onto my bed. Unwrapped a piece of candy, threw the candy away, and stood staring at the wrapper in my hand. While jogging late at night, I passed a guy who extended his hand. Assuming he wanted a high five, I smacked his hand as I ran by. Turns out he was just hailing a taxi. I drove all the way to work and parked before realizing I had forgotten to drop my kids off at school. They knew the whole time but didn't say a word, hoping they could skip school. Gotta love those sneaky little devils. Exhausted and watching TV in bed, I saw the characters get into a car together. For a brief moment, I thought, "Oh no, I forgot to put my seatbelt on," before realizing I was in bed and nowhere near a car. Mixed up my morning routine by rubbing aftershave into my hair and putting hair gel on my face. The worst part was laughing at myself after the aftershave mishap, thinking, "What was that about?" before promptly applying the hair gel to my skin. When I was around 13 or 14, I woke up in my bed in the middle of the night and thought, I need to get home before my parents notice I'm not there. I snuck out of the house, fully aware that I had to be quiet so I wouldn't wake them, and walked a block away before realizing I'd been in my own room the entire time. Confused, I snuck back into bed. So strange. Back in high school, while living on my family's farm, I had the daily task of feeding the horses and barn cats early in the morning. At 16, waking up at 6 a.m. left me barely awake. One morning, I followed my usual routine, grabbed the cat food, walked to the table, and poured it into my cat's bowl. As always, my cat jumped onto the table to start eating, and I absent-mindedly petted the animal in front of me. The fur felt oddly coarse, so I glanced down only to see a skunk calmly eating the cat food while I stroked its back. Woke up in a panic, threw on my clothes, and shoved all the stuff on my floor under my bed. Then I froze, realizing it was 3 a.m. I didn't have school, and I was 23 years old. Two moments stand out. The first was while playing Xbox. I got up for a drink, came back, and couldn't find my controller. I searched everywhere, under cushions, in drawers, even around random spots, only to discover I had put the controller in the fridge where I grabbed the soda. The second happened recently. I drove home from work, parked, went upstairs, and began taking off my shirt before realizing I hadn't finished my shift. I had just stepped out for a quick drink. Tried to get into a stranger's car, thinking it belonged to my friend. The owner, understandably, looked absolutely terrified. Sat at a suburban Palo Alto intersection around 11 p.m., patiently waiting for the stop sign to turn green. Made the most amazing chicken stock, carefully simmered for 24 hours. Then, without thinking, I put the colander in the sink and poured the stock straight down the drain, saving only the scraps. I cried. Intended to put a fresh roll of toilet paper on the holder, but instead tossed it into the toilet. While playing guitar, I reached for a cracker and ended up eating my pick.